Hello, thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. I'm Reverend MeeLing, also known as Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady MeeLing, Lady Dori Belle, quite a few other names. Nonetheless, thank you for tuning in. So, I'm going to discuss my ex-in-laws today in this particular video broadcast because I had discussed them earlier and, I have to essentially go through in a more close-up version, I suppose, in certain references. So, when I met my ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, the first time, at the house in Fort Worth, Texas, off of, I think it's Dorsey Lane, if I'm not mistaken. I had also been introduced to my ex-father-in-law, who I refer to as Grandpa Nichols. He was in Vietnam. He volunteered for, I think it was either 5 or 6 tours. And he had been a drill sergeant for about 7 years. We got along fantastically. Grandma Nichols is from the Dominican Republic. Meaning Grandpa Nichols, met her in the Dominican Republic when he was stationed there. Grandpa Nichols was born and raised essentially in Steele, Alabama. And he is one of 12 that had survived in regards to great-grandma Nichols's births. Children. I think he was the eldest, if I'm not mistaken. And so, or I think Tony was just older than him, one or the other, but of the eldest. And so, when I was introduced to Grandma and Grandpa Nichols, we got along great. I had discussed things in reference to Grandma Nichols about my babysitter when I was growing up, and we discussed certain things that I had remembered before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And I had asked her about certain foods and stuff like that, and Grandma Nichols had discussed certain aspects of the culture that I had remembered from when I was growing up. Not just my babysitter, by the way, her husband, as well as different areas when I grew up going to New York, because there is an actual Dominican area in certain sections of the 5 boroughs in New York. And so she and I had discussed a few things. Grandpa Nichols and I discussed a bunch of other things. And so, ironically, my now dead ex-husband was upset because I got along better with Grandpa Nichols than he ever did. I also got along with Grandma Nichols better than he ever did. So then, while we're talking, my ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, shows up with her 3 children. Brieanna Marie Lopez, Marissa Marie Lopez, and Joseph Anthony Lopez. Brieanna Marie Lopez was, I think, in middle school at the time, and because I kind of figured it was testing sort of limitations in certain regards, and so, okay, well, just be more respectful. And then I watched how Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez treated her, and I was like, okay, slowly roll a little bit. And I get it. And then Marissa Marie Lopez, the middle child, was just essentially trying to exist, essentially. And then Joseph Anthony Lopez, I don't deal well with spoiled children. I do not deal well with spoiled children. I never have. I never will. And I mean, I could, I don't know, but not in that sort of way. And so Joseph Anthony Lopez would speak to his mom, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, as though she was his servant. It's like, oh, yeah, I can tell you right now the way I was raised, that wouldn't fly. What would fly is my body as I was thrown. If I were to run my mouth the way that boy ran his mouth at his mom. And so when Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez showed up, Grandpa Nichols, Grandma Nichols and I were talking. And Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez found out that I had brought some stuff because I was raised when you go somewhere, you bring something. So I made a couple of pies. I was just like, oh, I'll make this pie and this pie and this pie, and here you go. And when Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez found out about that, she said, well, I can go to the store and buy any pie I want. And then Grandpa Nichols said, yeah, you could, but you can't buy a homemade pie. You can't, like a homemade pie. You could buy a lot of pies at the store and they can taste close to it, but a homemade pie, you cannot touch a homemade pie no matter how much you try. And so I looked at Grandpa Nichols and he was like, oh, yeah, that is my... And so then Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez instantly had this, as it was explained to me later, this issue of like, well, I'll just buy this and it'll be just as good. And it didn't matter. All of the years from essentially around November of 2000 through to, well, when Grandpa Nichols passed in 2008, and then a little bit later, in regards to Grandma Nichols, I'd make pies. And each time going from San Antonio to Fort Worth, make some pies. So because Grandpa Nichols grew up in Steele, Alabama, it was one of those, well, I can make just different fruit pies. It's very easy, for me at least. So, one time it was an apple pie, next time it was an apple turnover pie, and there is a difference, and I know there are those who know that. Another time there was a peach pie, another time it was a peach cobbler, and again, there is a difference. And then another time was a peach turnover pie. I made rhubarb pie, I made 3-mix berry pie, just different stuff, because it was like, and I had to make it, essentially where he could eat it because he had diabetes. And so, just the different stuff. I was like, okay, well, this time I feel like making this one, but I'm going to do it a little bit different. Instead of making it a pie, I'm going to make it half turnover, half cobbler, and just whatever I felt like doing, cherry pie, so on and so forth. And Grandpa Nichols was just, as soon as I showed up to the door, you brought me pie, right? You brought me pie. Yes, I brought you pie. Here you go. And so, same thing with Grandma Nichols. Now, Grandma Nichols, she is the type of person who would cook chicken and rice and mix it with wet dog food as well as dry dog food, and then wondered why her dogs were overweight. There were, those dogs ate better than I did as a child. Just gonna point that out there. Nonetheless, I found out she liked pecan pie. So I came up with a recipe for caramel pecan pie. And she was the type of individual that if you showed up to her house, help yourself to whatever's in the kitchen as far as whatever's already made. When some of her friends showed up to her house after the first time I had made the pie, I had handed it to her, and her hands went, oh, that's a pecan pie. And I told her, I said, yeah, you like pecan pie, right? I made this recipe just for you. And she's like, yeah, that's cool. It's my pie. And then she just started speaking in Spanish, and I was like, Okay, well, I'm glad you're gonna like that. However, ooh, I know what those words mean. I know what coño means. I do know that. I know what that word means. And so you always learn the bad words before you learn the good words, technically speaking, and pun intended. And so her friends showed up like within 20 minutes of me bringing that pecan pie over. And she cut a piece for herself, put it on her plate, and she had the pie like right next to the plate. One of her friends goes in the kitchen, grabs a plate to go to where the pie was. Grandma Nichols turned that fork around. I was like, oh, and then just a whole bunch of words that went along with coño. And so just continued going. And I looked over, I was like, ooh, ooh, she is not going to share that pie. That was my understanding and comprehension. She gonna cut you, like she's being nice by showing you that fork. Like she has a knife next to her, and she from the Dominican Republic. I know she knows how to use a knife, and so Grandpa Nichols, on the other hand, he would take his pie and put it in his room, and that was it. Like you didn't know he had pie because he was not willing to share it like whatsoever. Well, I also made pumpkin pie in regards to like because that was what Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez liked, and it got to the point where I had to make a pie. I actually had to make two pies just for her because she would not give any to her children. And I was like, okay, like this is my kid. Like, what is wrong with me? Nonetheless, that was the sort of thing. And so anytime I stopped by, bringing my children by, um, it was one of those, okay, I got like this whole before the first year, like before my daughter was born, essentially I would bring at minimum 5 pies each trip. And it was usually 2 times a month that would wind up going to Fort Worth from San Antonio and back in a weekend. All right, is what it is. Well, each time Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez would bring over a store-bought pie and then go to her father and go, essentially Grandpa Nichols, yeah, look, got this. And he'd look at the pie and he'd look at Susie and look at the pie, look at Susie and go, why don't you give that to your mom? And it's like, ooh, I think he likes the pie I cook. Well, Grandma Nichols, she'd look at the pie, look at Susie, look at the pie, look at Susie and go, I mean, I'll have some friends over later so they can they can have that. Susan brought me care about pecan pie, so oh, you don't know. And so that was essentially what wound up happening. So watched that for several years. I will do a separate video in reference to my other ex-sister-in-law. However, in reference to Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez and her children, they, meaning her children, Brieanna Marie, Marissa Marie, and Joseph Anthony Lopez, were able to ask me questions. Usually Joseph didn't, though, because when it came to Joseph, he knew that I was strict. And he threw fits because he was like, all of my other aunts are so much nicer than you. I don't care. I'm not all your other aunts. I am just me. So either you're going to have respect when you speak with me, or you can go and speak with your mom, because I'm not going to, I don't know who you think you're talking to, boy, but I am not that. So you will not have an attitude with me. You can go over in your little corner and you can me, and I don't care. I will go outside, have a cigarette, and you can still me all you want. I don't care. I'm not gonna just. Every other aunt is so cool compared to you. I don't care. Do you mean every other one of your aunts buys you everything you want and tells you you're a special snowflake? Yes! Okay, I'm not them. And so, well, I'm the boy and the boy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know you're the male and you carry on the last name. However, you know what the difference between you and the others are? What? They're going to outlive you. So, maybe you should be a little more respectful. And, you're so mean, I'm going to tell my mom on you. Go right ahead. Let me know when I care. Oh, you're so mean. I'm gonna go tell on you. Go tell. Go ahead. Go. Let me know when I care, boy. Because I'm not going to play this garbage game that you think I'm going to play. I don't have patience for that sort of garbage. I'm going to play my video game then. Yeah, you go play your video game and let me know when I care. I still don't. So... You're not a cool aunt. I don't care. Well, Marissa Marie Lopez, the middle child, she knew that, essentially I was one of the few in adult life, as in that regard, that she could speak with and ask questions. And slowly, Brieanna Marie Lopez had come around and realized that, yeah, I'm strict. There's no denying that. However, as long as you are like honest, I'm not going to be, pain about it. It's just going to be whatever. And if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an honest answer. And so one day, several years after first meeting, Brieanna Marie Lopez came up to me and she said, "What is an abortion, Aunt Susan?" And I was sitting in the smoking section because they didn't smoke in the house because Grandpa Nichols used to smoke. Nonetheless, sitting outside in the front and what is a what? What is an abortion, Aunt Susan? Um, have you asked your mom yet? Like, it caught me so off guard because it was like, ooh, and she said, and Brieanna said, yeah, well, her mom said that she shouldn't do it. Lit up another cigarette with the one that was in my hand. What else did she tell you? And Brieanna Marie Lopez said, all she told me was not to do it. Pull up a chair. And so she did. Brought the chair next to mine. I said, okay. I asked her how old she was. She told me her age. And I said, personally, I have this thing about, being, in a known that, or at least hopefully aspect in regards of a long-term commitment that can possibly lead to marriage, that sort of thing. I don't necessarily agree with abortion. I understand it. I comprehend in certain regards why. However, my personal opinion is if you willingly choose to have sex and you get pregnant, you, depending on your age, should really think about certain other options, because if you choose to go with an abortion, you cannot undo that. if you choose to have the child and then give the child for adoption, that is a way to, hopefully be able to continue certain aspects. And then, there are groups nowadays that can assist you in making sure your child gets into a good home and fostering and stuff like that. And she just kind of, we're going to go like real deep. And I looked at her and said, you asked me a question. And obviously, your mom is not going to tell you the truth if all she's doing is saying, don't do it. I'll tell you my opinion. I'll tell you why I have my opinion. And then what you choose to do with that is up to you. But understand, in reference of abortion, if you choose to have sex and you know the possible repercussions of it, and there are certain things. Now remember, you need to use a condom, because condoms not only assist in preventing pregnancy, but it also assists in preventing STDs. She asked me what STDs were. Okay. Get another cigarette out. By the time this discussion was over, I smoked a whole pack of cigarettes. It was like, okay, well. All right, then. So I discussed as far as abortion. In my opinion, I understand when it comes to rape that you have that. It makes sense to me in reference to that. However, again, you still have if you can tolerate certain things and then go forward with the aspects of adoption, hey, cool. If not, understood in that regard. In reference to, if the mother and or the child have a high risk in regards to a death issue because of certain ectopic pregnancies, different diseases that can be traced and found in certain regards, it makes sense to me. I don't necessarily agree in that regard if both are able to live. However, at the same time, I understand that. And then, that's a different set of aspects. So Brieanna Marie Lopez asked me a whole bunch more questions. And I said, I comprehend that you are obviously sexually active. And she kind of got all red in the face. And I was like, yeah, you wouldn't be asking me this question if you didn't have certain, well, I'm asking for a friend. Yeah, okay. Is your friend named Brieanna Marie Lopez? And then her face got even redder. And I was like, okay, so, obviously, I'm dumb. I'm not that dumb. And so she asked me a few other questions, and it was one of those, the other aspect you have to take into consideration is, can you take care of the child? You need to be able to make sure that not only giving all the love you possibly can, but also at the exact same time of being able to provide. Having children is not, it's not cheap. It's expensive. It's extremely expensive. Just look at the price of diapers. And she was like, what do you mean? Well, look at the price of diapers. And, take a look at the biggest box of diapers for, the younger size, and multiply that times about, 3 for 1 month, if you're lucky, depending on, and this was back in like 2008 or 2009. And she's like, okay. I said, and that doesn't even take into consideration wipes, food, housing, clothes, and I go on and on and on. She's like, okay. And so I said, however, also make sure you understand that just because you choose to have that sort of stuff go on, that when choosing to have a child, that is not going to guarantee that you stay in that relationship. You cannot have a child and expect to stay in that relationship and that be the saving grace of. You have to actually, want to be in certain regards in, the consensual way and all these other things. And she goes, okay, that makes sense. She asked me a bunch more questions. No problem. Makes sense. Later, she had her child. And then Brieanna Marie Lopez comes up to me and she goes, waits for Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez to go in the house. And she sees me smoking. She goes, Aunt Susan, you're going to be so proud of me. Okay. And then she says, but don't tell my mom. I cannot make that promise. I don't know if I will be proud with that statement. So go ahead. And Brieanna Marie Lopez looks at me and she says, I got a tattoo. How old are you? And I don't remember how old she was. She was still in high school. And I was like, where did you get that done? And she told me at some guy's house. And I was like, oh. Did he have a business? Like he ran it out of... No. He was just doing it. Oh. And those who have had tattoos done and or tattoo artists understand that. Okay. So glad I said I can't make that promise. Why do you think that I will be proud of you? Why? Why do you think that? And she goes, well, I gotta ask you a question before. Oh, that's not enough? That's not enough to be like, oh, okay, go ahead. My stupidity, what could be worse than that? And then Brieanna Marie Lopez asked me if tattoos are supposed to wash off when you take a shower. My bad. Whoops. I guess I got the response to that. Okay. And so my question was, did it hurt when you got the tattoo? Did you feel the needle going into your flesh, or did you get like henna? And they tickled, what happened? And she said, no, it really hurt. It hurt a lot. Oh, then no, it should not wash off. No. Well, I had to ask, why would you ask me that? And so she turns and she shows me, and there is like part of her tattoo. What is that supposed to be? And she said it was her son's footprints. Oh. Yeah. That's not supposed to wash out. If it hurt to get that done. And she said, but so then I asked, well, how much did you pay for the tattoo? And she was like, oh, like $30. Oh, well, there's another aspect. And so I asked if she knew what an autoclave was, or if she saw the instruments being pulled out and opened fresh. And she was like, why would you ask me that? Okay, so I remember how I said I don't know if I can keep that promise to not tell your mom. And Brieanna Marie Lopez said, yeah. Said, I'm going to tell you that I have to tell your mom, and I'm going to tell you why. And she looked at me, she goes, well, what's the big deal? And I said, do you understand the problem with sharing needles? She said, no. So remember how we discussed STD issues? And she said, yes. I said, okay. If it doesn't come out of a clean place, there can be issues. There are bloodborne pathogens that can remain. And if it is used on you after that needle had been used on somebody else, you are able to contract that disease. So that is important. Why you have to go to a reputable tattoo shop where you know it's going to be safe, where you know it is going to be clean, where you see the autoclaves, where you see them take it out of a fresh packaging, that sort of stuff. Because there are aspects that you got to be careful with. And so I go over these different things and I explain certain aspects. And this was before being in the Austin Dominant Mentor program, by the way. And so went through these different things, and Brieanna Marie Lopez looks at me, she goes, I really don't want you to tell. I get that. However, you need to be checked. Not just like immediately, but in a few months you need to be checked again, because depends on certain things. And so she just kind of looked at me, she's like, okay. Went over a few other points and went and talked with Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez and explained that, and that is what it is in that regard, because I'll get to that one. So then, as far as Marissa Marie Lopez is concerned, took her with my son and my daughter to go to Georgia and to Florida, because she didn't have a child to take care of, and, could get her out of the state of Texas, not in a bad way, just get her to see certain things, because she had never even been out of Fort Worth, with the exception of like one time where she went to Georgia and didn't leave any vicinity of, and she was very young at the time as well. So Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez was very angry because I wouldn't take Joseph with. And I said, well, first and foremost, unless you are going to ensure that boy does not have I know I won't have a problem keeping that attitude in check. However, I also don't want to deal with you complaining to me for making sure to keep that boy's attitude in check. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, I am not willing to deal with that at all. And, unless you're going to tell me that you're not going to complain if I handle business, I'm not taking him with me. So we had a few words in reference to that, and Marissa Marie Lopez was the only one who went with. And so that was the way it went. Now, yes, there was the additional benefit that I got to go scuba diving twice out of 2 weeks, and once in Boca leaving from Boca, and once in leaving from the Florida Keys to go to the Vandenberg. However, there were the other stuff that was going on. She got to see the different beaches. I got to teach her different things, just like I got to teach my son and my daughter, and all this sort of stuff. And then I got to see Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, as well as those that she, bred. And so that I'll get to that one in the next official YouTube video. Nonetheless, Marissa Marie Lopez was able to ask a bunch of questions and actually be a child for once, instead of having responsibilities that she had to take care of all the time. She could actually go out and have fun. She actually got to do things. And so, that sort of stuff. And I can see certain similarities. However, there's also a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to be taken care of first before I can do that. And so nonetheless, the other aspect is I could see certain things in reference to a specific community that she very much would fit into. And so it was one of those, okay, well, I understand your mom is not necessarily going to be understanding of the LGBTQP aspect. So I'm just gonna, we'll talk the whole time. You ask questions, I'll answer. And so she got the ability to ask that. And then I had to explain to her when driving through from Texas to Georgia why we could not stop late at night in certain areas. Not saying all individuals in that regard, however, didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention in that regard. My son looking as my son does, my daughter looking as my daughter does, my niece looking as my niece does, and me looking as I do. And mainly the aspects of me looking as I do. That like fully acknowledging mainly having to do with me looking the way I do. And not saying there aren't people in the South who have tattoos. That's not it. Not saying having to do with the hair color so much as the hairstyle and combination, but also my mouth. That's really what it had to do with my mouth. And so, I have no filter. And somebody saying certain things, and I'm all for the Second Amendment. However, I'm all for the Second Amendment. So, knowing my mouth and all that sort of stuff, just pointing out realities at that point in time. And not all, obviously, just knowing reality. So then, in reference to Joseph Anthony Lopez and the times of, he had this authority issue. He had problems treating my son and my daughter with the respect that, should have gotten. And I didn't tolerate it. Now, going back to Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, their mom. And so starting off with the issues she had in regards to, okay, well, bring pie, do this, do that. And as much as she had her issues in regards to getting the store-bought pies, she sure did not hold back when it came to her pumpkin pie pies that she wanted for herself, and then having to make one for, there were 3 children. I should have only had I should have realistically 1 pie, but okay, 2, and then I'm not making more than 3. That's it. You got 3, that's it. And I technically don't even have to make you a pie, because I'm not staying in your house. I'm doing this out of a courtesy. And so she threw this, whatever, I don't have patience for that. Then anything I did, it was one of those, well, if you can do that, I can do better. Whatever, I'm not in competition with you. I don't care. Well, you can do that. Well, I can go to the store and buy that. Well, just because you go to the store doesn't, yes, they're in regards to mass production. Obviously, it's mass produced in certain regards for certain aspects. However, there are certain things, similarly to what Grandpa Nichols said, that you just cannot have in a mass-produced sort of way. And so you just, deal with it. Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez would, and I thought, I picked this up. Those who have known me throughout the years know that I'm quite dense when it comes to certain things. I could tell Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez was flirting with my now dead ex-husband when he was alive. I could pick that up. Those who know me very much know, understand, and comprehend. I don't pick up on that very easily. I could pick up on that. I could tell she was hitting on her brother, my then, and ugh, I was like, ooh, ew, ew, just ew, 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 ew. And she would defend, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez did defend incest to me. And I was like, no, 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 no. The fact that you live in the state of Texas, and specifically more so below the Mason-Dixon line, do you understand how many people who have grown up below the Mason-Dixon line have been trying to fight against that stereotype, and you are like, woohoo, are you kidding me? No, that's wrong. Like, ew, ew, ew. And I can't be the only one, just ew. When it came to the final separation time frame, now I should pause real quick and rewind a bit. When it came to multiple aspects of conversations that I dealt with because of my now dead ex-husband, she would take his side. She thought it was perfectly acceptable for her brother to beat me in front of not only my children, but also hers, and would laugh about it and all that sort of stuff. During the first separation, she believed his lies as far as like he had told her, and he admitted this to me after the final separation, he had told her that he thought I cheated. Oh, no, no, not how I am. No, not how I am. While realistically, he had been the one cheating the whole time. And so she took his side in that regard, among several other things. And it was more along the lines of, no, 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 I didn't cheat on your brother. I probably had an opportunity or two time here and there. However, I'm just not like that. And so Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez not only was on her brother's side before the first separation, obviously after the second separation, but during certain situations, she actually defended him and had told me in front of her daughters and her son, as well as my son and my daughter, that she agreed with her brother, saying, well, if you didn't have an attitude when you said no, he wouldn't feel that way. If you didn't do this, he wouldn't have hit you. If you did this way, he wouldn't have done that to you. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? How are you defending that? Especially in front, like, I'm here, like, defending myself. And, well, if you wouldn't defend yourself, it wouldn't, happen so often. Excuse you? Well, if you just accepted the fact that, I mean, is it really that big of a deal? As I'm cleaning blood off of myself, mind you. And yeah, I think it's a little bit of a big deal. I think so. I could be wrong. However, that's like it shouldn't be going on. And so she continued to defend that. And it was one of those, I don't have. Well, there was one particular point in time before the first separation, I wound up bringing my biological sister to Fort Worth. She actually stayed with everybody at Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez rental house. And to give you a understanding, especially if you've seen and specifically listened to prior official YouTube videos on my channel, as far as how my biological sister, Patricia Ann Hom, had been throughout my childhood as well as after, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez and Patricia Ann Hom got along fantastically. In front of me, as I was cleaning myself off from another conversation, my biological sister looks at me and then looks at Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez and says, "Oh, why couldn't you be my sister instead of her?" Well, excuse me. Sorry, I'm just cleaning off, whatever. What's the big deal? No big deal. I'm just, whatever. And so, it is what it is, right? I guess. Nonetheless, that gives you an example in that regard of how much they got along and how I did not. And so then there was a point in time during the, I think it was after the final separation, at some point in time when my now dead ex-husband was in Iraq. And he had already not listened to me on a bunch of things. And I was in the parking lot of Home Depot. And he was just going on this tirade. And I was like, why can you just, you could just speak with, James and Lydia. I don't need this. I don't need this. You need to speak with. And he just didn't. He didn't want to. And it was just an argument on the phone. I was like, I don't care. And then he started calling me all sorts of names and just on and on and on. It's like Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, first and foremost, took her brother's side, of course. And then she came over and was like, the employees of Home Depot are uncomfortable at, you crying because of whatever her brother was telling me on the phone. And it's like, oh, excuse me for defending my son and my daughter, as well as myself in various ways. And so it was just one of those, I don't have patience for this, and wound up leaving, of course. Nonetheless, before he had left for Iraq, after the final separation, he and Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., had discussed with her about certain things that were going to happen that particular night. And Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez asked if she could join and be a part of it. Oh, you're going to just go to that level of defending incest, aren't you? Okay. Ew. Ugh. I mean, it's bad enough that wound up happening. However, she actually wanted to be a part of that, in specific with her brother. Ew. I didn't have a choice. She wanted to be a part of that. It's like, oh, just ew, gross. Nonetheless, after my now dead ex-husband, then just final separation from, had returned to Texas after being in Iraq a very short amount of time, and the injuries and stuff like that, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez was, oh, he's perfect. No, he's still him. and just all these other aspects. Oh, you're such a war hero. No, he's not. He is not a war hero. Oh, maybe that. No. Like, what is wrong with you? Oh, blah, blah, blah. No. Why are you defending him? Oh, my mistake. For the past, however many years you've been defending that. Why would I think that? Okay, fine. And so she would stroke her brother's ego and all that sort of stuff. And so, nonetheless, that is what it is. And when he died, because she couldn't get certain things to occur, essentially partially, was in regards to having his casket taken to the St. Patrick Cathedral, knowing that he was an atheist up until the day he died. And the other stuff, as far as the different things that shouldn't have been in there, as far as religious and spiritual symbols. And I am not going to pay for that excavation out of pocket. They wanted to do that. As far as my ex-in-laws, you can pay for it. That's just going to be how that goes. That's realistic. I have already paid enough. You can get my permission after you get the funding. However, no. No. Not unless there is a particular religious organization that is willing to do certain things in that regard, and then we can talk, meaning that religious organization and I, and then we can come to terms on certain things. However, I'm not paying for that out of pocket. I already told Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, as well as her sister Mary Evangelina Nichols-Osteen, anything that the Army, meaning, standard issue, is not going to cover, that is on you. Those are your bills, and I am not taking those bills from you. You will pay them on your own, period, and end of story. And so then we can get it. You can pay for that silver, colored, painted, fluffy, whatever casket. You can pay for that. The Army will only pay for so much. You pay for the rest. That's how that goes. You want this? You pay that to the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Not like I'm not. You want that? You owe them that, not me. And so, in that regard, didn't want to pay attention to my warnings, didn't want to, all this sort of stuff. I was like, that's a you issue, not a me issue. That you want to do that, that's on you, that's not on me. No. I warned you repeatedly not to do that. You didn't want to listen to me. I don't care. You knew. I'm not gonna. That's just how that goes. If you don't like it, I don't care. No, I gave the warning repeatedly. There are many times I have given many warnings that were never heeded. Well, you know what? Now that the warnings that I repeatedly said, you can pay up. I have given enough, obviously. And so, you deal with that. And if, hypothetically, my dead ex-husband, their spiritual husband, is haunting them along with the other demons, well, that's their problem, not mine. No, I don't have to deal with that in that regard. Just saying. And so I have put my foot down. That's how that goes. Nonetheless, it was explained various ways that they thought they had the right. I told them, no, you don't. And then later, when I wound up telling them after the Bronze Star returned to the Army, and I spoke with Grandpa Nichols first, before speaking with Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez about that, which she was extremely pissed off at, that I had returned the Bronze Star to the Army, giving it to his commanding officer, the colonel, and the 3 individuals, I don't care, you don't like it. And she threw a fit. She was extremely upset. I don't care. You don't understand. He did not earn that. Not just he didn't earn that, he did a bunch of stuff that the Chief Warrant Officer 3 tried to explain to you and your other sister. However, you didn't want to listen. So I dealt with it. I'm done. It's over. So she didn't like that. She didn't like the fact, similarly to her son, Joseph Anthony Lopez, the attitude that they did, I didn't tolerate. That's just the way it is. And so later, when Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez found out that I was involved with the BDSM, LGBTQP, and swinger community for years, she had said she wanted to get involved with that. I gave her some ideas, and I told her, you should probably get your tubes cut, or at minimum be on birth control if you refuse to get your tubes cut, all this stuff. Oh, what's the worst that can happen? You can get knocked up and you can catch STDs. That's like right there. Psh, that simple. She didn't want to listen to me on that. For one Christmas, she had asked me she had told me, I shouldn't say she asked me, she told me. She said, Susan, I know what I want you to get me for Christmas. And I asked, what? And Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez told me she wanted me to pay for a tattoo for her. And I said, I will pay for an hour. I will not pay for a whole tattoo. No, I will not pay for a whole tattoo. That is not going to happen. Especially the shop, because of that prior explanation earlier in this video and prior discussions, I make sure to go to a good place to make sure that my stuff is clean and clear when getting a tattoo. I don't want to have any issues in that regard. So, I'll pay for an hour, but I am not buying you a whole tattoo. And so at that time I went to Cat Tattoo in Addison. Now, I will pause real quick that particular portion that I had fast forwarded to. The last tattoo that I had gotten up until that point is my ocean tattoo. My tattoo artist, a former Navy guy, had to go to Maryland after this tattoo, because I had sent him the pictures for him to make from the pictures that I took, make the tattoo for me. And so, that is the tattoo. And it's a combination of between 3 and 5 pictures that I had sent him from when I had landed at the bottom of the ocean in Cozumel, as well as in Boca Raton, as well as at the Vandenberg. Well, no, not at the Vandenberg. There was the ocean portion of the top for that, but nonetheless. So after this particular tattoo was complete, I went in and brought him the Thanksgiving pie like I had done the prior year. He was like, yes, I just wanted to let you know. What's up? I'm going to be going to Maryland. Oh, why? And he said something about his baby mama or something like that. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, so probably not going to see you for a while. Okay, well, here's your, Thanksgiving, because I appreciate it, so on and so forth. I had gotten that tattoo. That particular guy did this tattoo, the under portion, the prayer, this portion, and then he had done Methuselah for me as well as this tattoo for me, including my platypus tattoo for me. And then he had done the lily tattoo, the tulips tattoo, Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and he did the first one of that tattoo for me. And so he had done quite a few tattoos. And so I knew what the price was. So I got a gift card for 1 hour for my ex-sister-in-law. Then she told me after how she didn't know this. However, those who understand tattoos, I could not return to that tattoo shop to get a tattoo from any of the guys who were there at the time. So she apparently went in, said she had a gift card, asked if it included the tip, and then got whoever to do the tattoo, and then didn't tell him that like he was tattooing over a very large scar. And so I had told my tattoo artist, like, so he knew. Nonetheless, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez had a tattoo over her tummy tuck line that was about 1 inch wide and then about 1/2 inch like peak because of the way the plastic surgery had gone for her. And he spent like 3 hours on that one section. And so as she told me that, I'm like, so I guess I'm never going to go back and get a tattoo done from any of the guys from that shop. I hate you. Stupid bitch. And so, you know, at least at the time and stuff like that, I might be able to get it from the owner, but that'd be it. And even then, you know, as long as the guy understood that, like, that was not my fault, that'd be it. That'd be it. So, nonetheless, that's another example in reference to my ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez. And then she tried to taunt me in reference to all these different escapades she was having. And I had asked her, I said, aren't you still married to your children's father? And her response was, well, that's not a big deal. I think it is. I think it is. And her response was, well, he's going to go back to prison. I mean, you could get a divorce and at least, like, not bother him in that sort of way. And he essentially went back to prison again because of his third DWI. And he had been an illegal immigrant and had gotten her pregnant just before a few things. And so when he had gotten the third DWI, from what I was told from Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, that he had gotten it the day after a police officer had died because of a drunk driver not paying attention to the police officer being on the side of the road. And I had asked later, like years later, which technically 2 years later, when I was told about certain other aspects, I asked her, I said, isn't that considered harboring something? Because he hadn't been found yet. And she said, well, that's not that important. And I said, I think it is. I think there is a legal thing. I don't know what it is, but I think that that's like a thing that you should like not do. Like I think so. I could be wrong, but I think that's illegal. And if it's not, you know, I don't know what the laws are on that, but you should probably, no, that's not that big of a deal. I don't know about that. So, you know, then in reference to going back to the portions of what I had discussed today, but also towards the end of my time speaking with Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, I was already at my last wit with her. It was one of those, I have done everything possible to remain calm in regards to so many different aspects. And when she told me that she had been responsible for starting the problems with the Army because she knew the names were similar, and in her words, she thought that the Army were full of stupid people, I had to focus my energy to not lose it at that point in time. And she had told me she had contacted somebody in reference to some other stuff in regards to changing certain things, and felt that, hey, it's a funny joke, right? I looked at her and I was like, oh, no, that's not funny. There were things that I obviously needed to discuss with certain individuals. There's no denying that. However, the starting point of one aspect definitely could have been left out completely. Now, admittedly, I would not have, I have to admit, I would not have gone as far as I had if it wasn't for my son and my daughter in reference to that memorial aspect. However, as I am how I am, I still would have. I just wouldn't have been as, no, I would have. Because of the way I am when it comes to making sure things are okay. Nonetheless, still infuriated, rightfully so, and Mary Evangelina Nichols-Osteen had already admitted she had contacted a bunch of guys in Georgia. Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez at that point in time had told me she had contacted a whole bunch of guys through different stuff. And I look at her and I said, I told both of you to stand the fuck down. What is wrong with you? I told you I was going to handle it. So who did you contact? And her response was, well, it's not that important now since you had to return the Bronze Star. It took a lot for me to not physically respond to that. And when I say physically, I mean, gardening. And so I would have been justified. I would have been. However, it took a lot for me to remain calm. As calm as I could. And then Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez had reiterated the aspect of, if it were my son, she would care more. But because it was my daughter, that was an issue. And I said to her, my son and my daughter are who you should be working to assist. Because my son and my daughter, despite how you view me and how you hate me because I'm your ex-sister-in-law, my son and my daughter are the living remnants of your dead brother / spiritual husband. Like that's what you got. And if you continue to choose, you won't even have that. And her response was, that's not that big of a deal. No, it is. My son and my daughter? Yeah, no. Let me understand this correctly. You went behind my back, as I told you to stay out of it, in reference to your dead brother, and you could not be bothered to help with my son and my daughter, specifically with what my daughter's going through. And her response was, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Her main complaint shortly before then was in reference to a male who was doing portraits of fallen soldiers. And her complaint, first off, was that she had to drive out to Arizona while I let her use my minivan, the Kia Sedona white. And then she complained because I did not let her use my GPS. And then she complained because that artist refused to do the portrait in the dress blues. And I reminded her, you do know that the Chief Warrant Officer 3 had told you that in the dress blues was the stolen valor. So if that guy is accustomed to doing portraits of soldiers, he'd probably be able to look at the dress blues the way the Chief Warrant Officer 3 did. And then she didn't like my tone of voice. And it was one of those, I don't care. I'm just going to throw this out there. Maybe a guy who does a whole bunch of portraits of flying soldiers could be like, so there is that stuff wrong. And he probably didn't even need the Chief Warrant Officer 3 to tell him that. He probably doing portraits probably could be like, so that doesn't make sense. And so Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez was upset because the pictures were done in camouflage. And I responded saying, well, probably because it didn't have any like stolen valor on it. And her response to me was, do you have to say it in that tone of voice? Well, maybe if you paid attention, that wouldn't be a problem. But, since when you're speaking to you normally, you're going to be dumb. You're going to throw this out there. Maybe the guy who does a whole bunch of portraits of the fallen guys has seen a uniform before. If he's doing portraits of, soldiers, maybe he even has a military background, and he would know. And her response to me was, why do you have to be so rude? It only took like 10 years to get to that point. It only took 10 years. But I was being rude, according to Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez, my ex-sister-in-law. That was her, yeah. However, she was able to do all that sort of stuff for her dead brother, my dead ex-husband, her spiritual husband, instead of assisting my son and my daughter. And so after the aspects of finding out on top of the other stuff in reference to the memorial aspect, I did ask, how did you get them to believe you were me? And she said, first, the names being so similar. Okay. What else? And she said because she took advice from Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., with the voice box thing of being able to do the changing, like speaking into it or something like that, and it changed the voice aspect. And I looked at her, I said, I hate you, and I will never forgive you for that. And I doubt that I am the only one because of all that stuff. Period and end of story. You need to understand and comprehend this is the last time you are going to see my son, and you've already seen my daughter for the last time. So, you have to live with that. And she, nope, I don't care. You prefer your dead brother over my son and my daughter alive? You can deal with that. I did everything above and beyond the stereotypical ex-wife, and you couldn't even appreciate that. Done. Well, you're not as important. Okay. Is that your final response? Yes, you're just not as important. I wish you had died instead of him. I guess I could say the same to you. personal opinion. Nonetheless, that is the end of this particular official YouTube channel of mine, Reverend MeeLing, broadcast in reference to that particular aspect. So my ex-mother-in-law can blame Susie Marie Nichols-Lopez for that, along with the other stuff. And if, hypothetically speaking, there were attempts to try to say that I did something wrong, what did I do wrong? Other than not be a stereotypical ex-wife, care more about my son and my daughter than anybody else did as far as like their own blood relations, and gave up everything possible for my son and my daughter to have as best as possible what they could, while making sure that soldiers of whichever aspect, whether veteran, active duty, National Guard, reservist, and or law enforcement, and or in other regards of fire department, were taken care of honestly. Not lying, telling the truth, not being a cheater, not causing problems needlessly. If those are those are illegal, okay. I don't think they are, though. And so, you guys have a good one.